The House will convene in 1 minute. Please be seated. The House will convene in 1 minute. Please be seated.
Members and guests, please rise for the invocation by Representative Tuss and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Creator God, thank you for this day and bless this House and our proceedings as we work for the betterment of this state and its inhabitants. Give us wisdom, give us patience, give us resolve. Provide us with the courage to look for solutions that may not be our own, but advance the greater good for the people of Montana and the stewardship of your creation, the land of shining mountains. We implore you to help us approach our work in a spirit of cooperation that minimizes derision and always seeks the way toward justice and inclusion. We pray all of this, along with our personal intentions, in your name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll.
Nicola Cockles is here. Okay. Mr. Speaker, 98 members are present. Representatives C. Fitzpatrick and Revis are excused.
The quorum is present and the House is ready for business. Are there any introductions? Representative Muskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request to be off the record and out of the journal for the purpose of an introduction.
So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, just want to quickly welcome the folks from Montana Youth Advocacy Day, a group of 90 inspiring youth from around the state who are here gathered in support of mental health policy reform.
Welcome to the House. Representative Running Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request to be off the record and out of the journal for the purpose of introduction.
So ordered.
Yeah, up in the gallery, we have the chairman of the Blackfeet Tribal Business Council, Rodney Jarvis.
Welcome to the House. Representative Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request to be off the journal and out of the record for the purpose of an announcement.
So ordered.
I just wanted to thank all of you that joined the public employees that were here today for lunch. It was very much appreciated.
Members, without objection, we'll go to order business number 2.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Appropriations recommend that House Bill 320 do pass, signed Representative Lou Jones, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Business and Labor recommend that House Bill 438 do pass, House Bill 367, 382 do pass as amended, Senate Bill 113 be concurred in as amended, signed Representative Ed Buttrey, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Judiciary recommend that House Bill 388, 415, and H.J. 14 do pass, House Bill 284, 400, 409, 439, and H.J. 6 do pass as amended, signed Representative Amy Regier, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Natural Resources recommend that House Bill 421 do pass, Senate Bill 55 be concurred in, House Bill 84 do pass as amended. Signed Representative Steve Gist, Chair. That is all, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, we'll go to order business number 6.
Mr. Speaker, House Bills 509 through 519 are introduced, read first time, and referred to committee. All are posted. Mr. Speaker, Senate Joint Resolution 6 and Senate Bills 20, 60, 121, 134, 165, 167, 174, 178, 190 have been read first time and referred to committee. All are posted. That is all, Mr. Speaker.
Members, without objection, we'll go to order business number 9, motions. Majority Leader Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House recess for the purpose of receiving formal addresses from Montana's U.S. congressional delegation, the Montana Chief Justice, and the chairman of one of Montana's tribal nations. Upon adjournment of the joint session, the House will be adjourned until the hour of 1 p.m. on Tuesday, February 18th.
You have heard the motion of Majority Leader Fitzpatrick. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. Sergeant at Arms Murfitt.
Mr. Speaker, the honorable senators of the state of Montana await entrance to the chamber.
Sergeant at Arms, will you please admit the senators into the chamber? Members of the body, I introduce you to President Regier. I'm right here. Oops. Wait, did you already? Majority Leader McGilvray.
Mr. President, I move that the body resolve itself into a joint session for the purpose of receiving formal addresses from U.S. Representative Zinke, U.S. Senator Sheehy, U.S. Representative Downing, Montana Chief Justice Swanson, and Chairman Justice Grayhawk Sr. of the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes. Mr. President.
You've heard the motion of Majority Leader McGilvray. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it. As so ordered, we are now in joint session. Sergeant of Arms Murfitt, will you please admit U.S. Representative Zinke into the House chambers and accompany him to the podium? Members, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you and the people of Montana, U.S. Representative Ryan Zinke.
All right. Have a seat. You know, I did not prepare a speech. I just want to talk to you as a Montanan. First of all, I want to thank all of you for doing what you do. Public service is not easy. And we all know we face challenges across this country and this state. But this is a citizen legislature and drawn from all walks of life in Montana. And it takes a lot of effort. And I just want to say thank you for all you do. Washington, D.C. today, never in my lifetime have I seen a president move so quickly on a variety of issues. Well, and if you want to know if whether he got something done, I invite you to Google the new Gulf of America. It's on Google and Apple. It's there. But it's also like this body, imperfect. You know, government by definition is imperfect. And regardless of what the media sometimes pumps, there's a lot of bipartisan issues too. And one of the bipartisan issues in Montana and across our country is our environment, our conservation. There's a reason why we all live here, because we enjoy the great outdoors. And the Montana that I grew up in has largely changed. You know, when I grew up, I didn't have to worry about public access or roads being closed, or I'd knock on a door and ask for hunting permission, and you got it. But today, there's a lot more fences up. Onyx should not be the way that we determine where public access is. Roads need to be opened. And our public lands, and look, we benefit from the great ones, from Roosevelt, from our country understanding there is a great outdoors, and it's worth defending. But it's hard to defend when we burn our forests down every year, when we mismanage our greatest assets, and we do. Across Montana, you look at Libby, the forest is dead. There's a canopy, but everything that below the canopy is dead. Look in the forests. We burned more 2x4s than we ever harvested last year. And it's a problem that all of us share and all of us have to be concerned with. But we can fix it. And fixing it in this issue will not come from one side of the aisle. Nor did how we get here from one side of the aisle. I will say this. I want you to think about this for a short time. Let's say you have a salmon and a trout in the same stream. Let's say upstream you have a national forest, and downstream you have a dam. I've just described every watershed in the great state of Montana, most of the watersheds in our western United States. So this is how we manage it. The trout are actually managed by the Department of Interior through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The salmon are managed by the Department of Commerce through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, NOAA. The Forest Service, surface is the Department of Agriculture through U.S. Forest Service, subsurface the Department of Interior through Bureau of Land Management. Our dam system, it's either Department of Army through Army Corps of Engineers like Libby, or it's Department of Interior through Bureau of Reclamation like Hungry Horse Dam. And I haven't even talked about an Indian Compact. So let's say you want to build a bridge. You want to build or restore a pipeline or upgrade a pipeline. You have to literally go through multiple departments with different leadership, oftentimes conflicting regulation in 168 different regions. And you wonder why we can't get things done. And so what's happening in D.C. is a shakeup, and I agree with it. And some of you may not like Mr. Must or not, or some of you may love him. I don't know him very well. But I know this. When you look at the grants that are out there and the mismanagement, I think there's goodness to look. And we may agree or disagree whether a certain project has merit. Let's have that disagreement. But there should be no disagreement on whether that project should be accountable, should be transparent, where every nickel of every taxpayer dollar should be known. But when the government hides, it deceives, not a lot of trust out there. In Montana, we deserve better. So I encourage you, all of you, to work together. We may have difference of opinions, and I'm sure there are, especially in the Senate. And that's okay. But we should not forget that we're Montanans, and we should have the discussion. Because I can tell you, anger does not provide solutions. Threats I see, energy. Made in America energy. Montana energy. But if we don't keep Colstrip fired up, there's going to be a lot of cold homes. If we don't save our dams on the other watershed, there won't be a light bulb on the Flathead. So we got to figure this out as Montanans. When companies leave Butte because they cannot find an energy contract, when they leave Great Falls, when they leave Billings, it should be an issue for us all. Because Montana should be the home of energy. Montana should be the light bulb of America, and yet we struggle. So there's fixes. One is that I don't see any, within the next 50 years, natural gas will be the bridge. There's no doubt in my mind, I can look at it. But there's future too. Nuclear energy, modular nuclear energy is an opportunity. I'm a naval officer. And I can tell you, if you can take a nuclear power plant and encapsulate it into a pressure cell, submerge it over 1,000 feet, arm it with nuclear warheads and torpedoes, I think you can find someplace on the surface that's good. I really do. So I promised I'd be the shortest, so what am I working on? As I travel around Montana, you know, the federal government takes care of their highways and bridges, and I will say not as good as they should, but they do. The state, to a degree, takes care of our bridges and roads. Again, not as good as they should, but they do. But who takes care of the counties? Who takes care of the counties? Well, I can tell you, if you're in Seeley Lake and you don't have a sewer, that means it's really hard to have affordable housing. If a bridge is over 100 years old and you can't put a school bus loaded across it, that's a problem. Evergreen has no sewer. So every 10 years when the Flathead floods, just a giant poosh of that flush of the toilet goes right in the Flathead. So our infrastructure at the county level, we need to shore up. You can clap for that one. But you look at affordable housing, you know, it comes up all the time. 40% of affordable housing, or housing right now, is permitting. Permits. So that's on a $600,000 house, you're talking $150,000. And then when you add interest rates running from 3 to, let's say, 5, that could double your interest payment or double your mortgage payment. So all of us have to be mindful of a couple things. One is that permits matter. They do. But we need to make sure permits are available. Again, government's not perfect, but we got to have affordable housing. And you got to get back on track on discipline. And lastly, this is what's going on in Washington, D.C. at the heart of it, is that President Trump has said no tax on tips. He has said no tax on disability, on seniors. He said that, and it's a campaign promise. And I've worked for him. A campaign promise with President Trump is a promise made, is a promise kept. He's also said we're not going to touch Medicare. He also said we're not going to touch Social Security. So where are we going to find the savings? Because all of us, like you, are fiscally responsible because that's our duty. So no matter what happens in the taxes and the savings, we can't go further into debt. Because it's the debt that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's a time bomb, and we all know it. And I can tell you 36 trillion reasons why it is. But it's fixable. It's fixable as all of us work together. So I end with this. I don't have a lot of power, but I have good letterhead. So if there's projects out there that your county and that would look at that's just been neglected, let me know. If there's kids out there that maybe have not thought about one of the military services or Academy or Merchant Marines, let me know. Most unusual, Montana has never had a problem filling our Academy seats. There's seats available today in the Merchant Marines. And if you don't know about the Merchant Marines, wonderful academy, 4 years. When you graduate, you can crosswalk to any commission, any service. Graduate from Merchant Marine Academy, you can be a naval officer in Air Force, no problem. But those that do serve, they do a 4x4, they're on 4 weeks, they're off 4 weeks. You can imagine a kid, the best paying job in the country when you graduate, best paying #1 is Merchant Marines. But they do it as a 4x4, they're back in Montana, best hunting season, best snow season, best summer. They have the job I want. So with that, thank you for listening. And I haven't seen any problem that's not fixable. And I wouldn't do this job unless I knew that in my heart. And there's no problem in Montana that's not fixable. But I encourage everybody on both sides of the aisle, there's no problem that can't be fixed. And don't look for perfect because it's government. I've never seen anything that's perfect in government. It's the last resort, not the first. So with that, thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Representative Zinke. Will the Sergeant of Arms please escort Representative Zinke from the rostrum. Sergeant of Arms Murfitt will please admit U.S. Senator Tim Sheehy into the House chamber and accompany him to the podium. Members, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you and the people of Montana, U.S. Senator Tim Sheehy.
Speaker of the House Lear, Minority Leader Sullivan, Senate President Regier, Senate Minority Leader Flowers, thank you for welcoming me into the chamber this afternoon. To Governor and First Lady Gianforte and to Lieutenant Governor Juris, thank you also for having me here today. You guys are doing a great job leading the greatest state in America. Thank you for all the hard work you're doing on both sides of the aisle. It's a big sacrifice, as I have learned in the last 7 weeks. Elected office is a unique undertaking, so thank you for doing it. Most importantly, thank you to the nearly 320,000 Montanans that entrusted me with their vote. It means a lot that you sent me here. I will work every day to deliver you lower grocery prices, cheaper gas, and a secure border for those who didn't vote for me. I can promise you I will still fight day and night, just as I did in Iraq and Afghanistan, for what's right for you and your families. I work for you, plain and simple. Clarity of mission is key to any successful organization, and as your senator, my mission is very simple. Lower grocery prices, lower gas prices, make our streets safer, plain and simple. In just a few short weeks, I've been on the job. We've faced national tragedy, including the worst wildfire in American history, which also became the most expensive disaster ever in the history of America, followed by a series of deadly plane crashes, which have been the deadliest in about 15 years. Unfortunately for me, my background in both of these areas is unique. I'm bringing that experience to bear to try to solve these tragedies so we don't have further tragedies like this in America. Montana, we have a unique relationship with wildfire. We also have a unique relationship with aviation. We have critical access communities that can only be accessed commercially via aviation. We have a vested interest in fixing these issues, and I'll be a leader on that for all Montanans. The first bill I supported in the U.S. Senate was the Lake and Riley Act. The Lake and Riley Act ensures that violent criminal illegal aliens who are here in this country illegally cannot continue to commit crimes. They cannot return to the U.S. I'm proud to say that that bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in both chambers of Congress and was signed into the President just a few days after he took office. Promises made, promises kept. The most important thing, the most solemn duty that government has to its people is to keep them safe. That's the fundamental role of any government. Fixing potholes is important. Keeping the lights on is important. But at the end of the day, keeping our communities safe is the highest calling of any government, whether that's safe from foreign invasion or safe from crime in our streets. And the Lake and Riley Act embodied that America First concept, that we're going to put the safety and well-being of our people first and always. So thus far, this U.S. Senate has confirmed more of Trump's cabinet nominees than the previous 3 administrations combined. Montana's overwhelmingly voted to save the American dream by electing President Trump to enact the America First agenda. In the Senate, it's been our job to ensure he has the team in place to do that. Just the other week, I spent all night on the Senate floor because we had Democrat obstruction tactics, which is their right to do. And we spent all night running out the clock to confirm nominees that were inevitably going to be confirmed. They were going to win anyways. They were going to be confirmed. These obstruction tactics did nothing other than rob the American people of critical floor time in which we could be passing legislation that would bring down inflation, secure the border, and help make our economy strong again. Now, working as a team with Senator Daines, Montana's voice is being heard loud and clear, and I want to talk about working as a team today, something that's personal to me. I spent the best years of my life leading troops all over the world on combat operations, and whether you're best friends or not, teamwork was key. And politics isn't that much different. To achieve our objectives and accomplish our shared mission, we must stay united as a team and deliver on our campaign promises. In D.C., we're already seeing the results of having unified House, Senate, and White House. We're working hand in glove across the board to deliver common sense solutions for the American people. This past election, Montana's had a clear choice between American decay and common sense, and they chose common sense. To my Democrat colleagues in this chamber, I hope you'll listen to the will of the people, which is to leave the crazy behind and put America first. Our nation is stronger with 2 healthy parties engaged in good faith negotiations for putting the interests of our people first. It doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but it means we can agree we want to bring inflation down. We want our streets safe, and we can work together to make that happen. I would ask you, leave behind the divisive rhetoric that has characterized our last 8 years of politics. Let's try to work together. Instead of being called racists and fascists and quacks and science deniers, American people said they were tired of the character assassination, the lawfare, the dehumanization that was hurled at all conservatives, moms who wanted their kids to go to school, not be kept out of school for lockdowns, dads who didn't want boys and girls' locker rooms. They were tired of being told they were racist for wanting a secure border, being told they were climate deniers for wanting cheap gas, and fascists for wanting safe streets. The American people didn't vote against Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. They didn't vote against John Tester. They voted for the future of their children, and they voted for America First. So I call on my Democrat colleagues, let's abandon the politics of resistance, let's stop calling for violence in the streets and obstruction, and let's reflect on the message that Montanans and Americans delivered to us in November. Let's try to craft solutions that actually make life better for Montanans and Americans. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can collaborate on the shared mission that we want our children's future to be better than our own. And I'd welcome all in this chamber and working with me to unify our state and our country behind competence and common sense. One thing we can all agree on, we want to bring down prices for families, boost real wages. We want farmers, ranchers, miners, loggers, electricians and carpenters to be able to earn a living wage in this country and continue to grow our economy and build our communities. It's our job to deliver that. And how we're going to do that is we need to provide permanent tax relief, reduce harmful regulations, and restore fiscal sanity. Think about this. In the last few weeks, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office of our own government, has found the U.S. Treasury is paying up to $500 billion a year in faulty payments. $500 billion of about a $6.5 trillion annual budget. $500 billion is being sent to the wrong people, to erroneous accounts, to overseas fraudsters. It's going into the ether, and we don't even know where it's going. The Pentagon can't even pass an audit. The DOJ team has uncovered we're spending over $100 billion with a B $100 billion in entitlement payments to individuals who don't even have a Social Security number. And up to 10,000 people are using the same Social Security number to draw benefits. The low estimate of that sum being obvious fraud paid out is nearly $60 billion a year, $1 billion a week in fraudulent payments coming out of our entitlement programs. To put that into perspective, the entire GDP of the state of Montana is $57 billion. So the entire economic output of the state of Montana every year is being wasted through improper payments through our Treasury Department, strictly in entitlement programs. And according to the Social Security Administration themselves, this isn't according to anyone other than the actual Social Security Administration, over 6.5 million people over the age of 112 are still drawing Social Security benefits. And the only place you'll find that many people over 112 is in the U.S. Senate in one spot at one time. And they've also said there's still people 150 years old or older drawing benefits as well. Since 2003, $2.7 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars in improper payments have been made. $236 billion of improper payments were wasted in 2023 alone. That's $236 billion just in 2023 alone, solely for Medicare and Medicaid, going to the wrong accounts, the wrong people, or overseas. USAID was also revealed to be a mess, as I'm sure you've heard, wasting billions of hard-earned taxpayer dollars on projects in Guatemala, transgender comic books in Peru, TEI in Serbia, literally meals for al-Qaeda fighters. Recently, my Democrat colleagues in the Senate have said it's unconstitutional what DOGE is doing. That's certainly an opinion. First of all, I'm glad that so many Democrats are now Democrat scholars in D.C. Or constitutional scholars, because that's a document we should all read and get to know better. But if you say it's unconstitutional to end the fraud, waste, and abuse of taxpayer dollars, was it also unconstitutional to allow 10 million illegal immigrants into our country? Was it unconstitutional to discharge over 8,000 U.S. service members with no due process, with no benefits, with no pay? Where was the outrage about the constitutionality of these actions? And the fact was there was none. Right now, we've sent, as we speak, $40 million a week to the Taliban. That's among many other programs where the U.S. taxpayers actively, daily funding terrorist organizations, nonprofits, masking funding to terrorists or terrorist safe haven countries. So the U.S. taxpayer, you, Montana taxpayers, are literally paying terrorist organizations directly. That's unacceptable, and after the sacrifices that myself, my wife made as a combat veteran of Afghanistan, as most of my friends who we all served together, that's unacceptable to me. And the withdrawal from Afghanistan, as many of you may know, is what got me involved in politics in the first place. And the fact that we are still, as U.S. taxpayer dollars, directly funding terrorist organizations is unacceptable to me. So I introduced the No Tax Dollars for Terrorists Act. That's pretty simple. All it says is no U.S. taxpayer money will be handed to terrorist organizations. And unfortunately, it sounds crazy. We actually have to say those words, that we have to pass an act to do that, but unfortunately, that's where we've ended up. But there's more we can still do: cutting red tape, balancing the budget, eliminating waste, and lowering taxes. Montana state government on both sides has done a fantastic job. We've set a national example of how we can operate as a state with a budget surplus, reducing regulations, and we have an incredibly strong and growing economy. We're a model for the nation, and hopefully we can make America look more like Montana in that regard. And there's a lot we can do in America. So while you're back here doing the people's work in Helena, I'll give you a quick update on the specifics of what I've been up to in D.C. The first bill I introduced as U.S. Senator was the VA Home Loan Awareness Act. We have millions of veterans who've come home who still don't have the ability to access or don't have the knowledge to access a VA home loan. We're going to make sure they have the knowledge and resources necessary to purchase a home and live the American dream that they've so well earned. The second bill I introduced was the Homeowner Energy Freedom Act to lower costs, protect consumer choice, and make the American dream of home ownership more affordable and more attainable for Montanans. In the wake of the Inflation Reduction Act, energy and housing costs have spiraled out of control nationwide. Many of it's due to radical environmental mandates and code requirements and reckless spending that have led to once-in-a-generation inflation. It's time to repeal those policies and bring back common-sense housing policies that make life affordable again for Montanans. Here in Montana, we know what the rest of the nation learned about 3 weeks ago. The catastrophic impact of wildfire can literally wipe your life off the map, wipe your farm off the map. It can destroy your home in just seconds. It doesn't take long. The rest of the American people watched as LA burned and finally realized that wildfire can eviscerate your life with little to no warning. Here in Montana, we know that from 1910, obviously to Canyon Ferry Lake last summer. That could have easily been Kalispell or Missoula or Butte or Bozeman or Helena right here. The fire we saw in LA, that devastation could have been in our backyard just like it was in 1910. So we're passing common sense legislation to bring back mission focus for our land management agencies. We've introduced the National Wildfire Service Act, which consolidates all of our national wildland firefighting capability under one person and one agency. So no more is there going to be the finger pointing between 17 different agencies about whether or not they should be fighting the fire and protecting your communities, our constituents. Now they will be required to protect those communities and fight that fire nationwide, all 50 states. That's an important bill that here in Montana will make a big difference when our communities are threatened by a wildfire. I'll add these efforts have been completely bipartisan. I've had wonderful support from our Democrat senators from mainly western states, but we've also had fantastic support from Democrats from states you would not typically view as wildfire areas, like Senator Kim out of New Jersey. You don't think of wildfires when you think New Jersey, but they had some terrible fires there in November of last year, and he understood right away that we need a better national apparatus to serve our communities and protect our people. These efforts are bipartisan and help us fulfill the mission of better protecting our communities, especially those who live on lands that feed America. One of America's greatest superpowers has been our ability to feed our own people and the world, and food security is national security. Bringing profitability back to agriculture is key. To that end, I was very proud to work with Senator Thune to co-sponsor a bill to introduce legislation that would permanently repeal the death tax. Especially in Montana, the death tax most acutely punishes hardworking families in agriculture by threatening to put their operations out of business after the tragic loss of a loved one. It's long past time we take this obscene tax off the table for good and give Montana farmers and ranchers the certainty they need to invest in their operations. Montana producers need predictability in the regulatory and the tax code across the board so they can invest in their operations, ensure the next generation can take their operations onward, and they can make the best food possible here in Montana. They can fight back against the big four meat packers. They can fight back against the over-consolidated agriculture companies that are driving them out of business. We need to empower Montana's ag community to keep feeding America. And as I've told a lot of folks in DC, maybe once a year you need an accountant. Maybe once a month a doctor, but every day, 3 times a day, you need a farmer and a rancher, and our policy should reflect that in our priorities. And when it comes to public lands, our producers need common sense policies from our public land management agencies. We need to bring local input back to the table for our public lands management agencies. We need to ensure that Montanans, they decide what happens in public lands in Montana. Not bureaucrats 3,000 miles away, not environmentalists from some nonprofit, and certainly not environmental lawyers. Montanans should decide how our forests and our grazing lands are managed. It's about time to take public lands and put them back into public hands. This means streamlining permitting for energy, mining, and timber projects and reforming the dizzying array of government agencies that control our public lands. It's time for our timber mills to return to Montana and for our great mining companies to know they can invest in the Treasure State, do business here, create jobs here, and support our thriving communities. We must unleash American energy across the board, put an end to radical job-killing agendas, and make sure that Montana comes first. 2 things can be true. We can embrace the natural resource economy. We can also want clean air, clean water, and healthy forests. We can advocate for both of those things responsibly right here in Montana, and we will. What we've seen these past few weeks is a radical reform of the federal government, and we're reforming the federal government so it works for, not against, the people of Montana. Most of all, we got to put America first in everything we do. It's not too much to ask from the American people that their government that they elect and they pay for puts their interests first. It's not too much for the American taxpayer, the truck driver, the single working mom to think that when their tax dollars go to the U.S. government, that government is making decisions that puts the American border first, American businesses first, and the American people first. And that's what we ought to deliver. And to that end, I'll work with Anybody, whatever letter comes after your name, I, D, R, E, I, E, I, O, I don't care. If it's good for America and good for Montana, I will partner with you in good faith to make sure we're delivering results for America and Montana. I cannot promise that you'll agree with everything I ever say or every bill I ever introduce. But I can promise you a solemn promise that just like I did in Iraq and Afghanistan, just like I do on the front lines of wildfires across this country, every decision I make will be made through the lens of what's best for the people of Montana, what's best for the American people. We have turned the page on a new chapter in American history, a chapter in which the future of our children will be better than our own, where the promise that tomorrow will be better than today is again upon us, a future where we put the American borders first and the American people first, a new age in which the future of our families rests not in the hands of bureaucrats or politicians, not in the hands of the president or giant corporations, but a golden age in which our future lies in the hands of we the people, a future where once again we'll put Montana and America first. Let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sheehy. Will the Sergeant please escort Senator Sheehy from the chamber? Sergeant of Arms Murfitt will please admit U.S. Representative Downing into the House chamber and accompany him to the rostrum. Members, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you and the people of Montana, U.S. Representative Troy Downing.
Wow, thank you. Please have a seat. Commander Zinke kept saying that he was going to be the shortest, but I'm pretty sure of the entire Montana delegation in Congress that I'm the shortest. So I'm going to stick by that. First of all, I want to thank you all for this opportunity, and I want to thank you all for what you do. Government closest to the people has the most effect on the daily lives of the people. And I want to make sure that you're using our office, my office, as an amplification of what you're trying to do for the people of Montana. Not in conflict, but as an amplification. How can we help you do what's right for the people of Montana? I'm honored to be here and honored to serve not just the constituents, the voters that put me there, but everybody in my district and everybody in this room. So thank you for this opportunity. First, I want to talk a little bit about teamwork, talk a little bit about unity, talk a little bit about coming together. I think it's really healthy to debate ideas. We all have different ideas on how things should work, what's important, what we should focus on. And I think it's important that we get that out there. And I've always said in my life, and a lot in my last office, I always promise I'm going to listen, I'm going to consider. I never promise I'm going to agree, because sometimes we don't get to that agreement. But that respectful debate, I think, is really important. And I look back at my journey and how I ended up where I'm at right now. And folks say, well, you were really successful doing this, or you were successful doing that, or you did whatever. I never did anything. It was always us. It was always we. It was always the people you surround yourself with. It's always the teams you put together. And again, not that you're always going to agree, but you know how to work together in a respectful manner and try to get things done. And I think we're starting to see some more of that, and it gives me some hope. The last Congress, the 118th, was very ineffective. There wasn't much unity. It was very ineffective, and I think that we are going to be much more effective in this Congress coming forward. And I'm just talking about partisan, what the Republicans want to do, what the Democrats want to do, but what we all want to do. And on the Republican side, I'm really happy that we have had moments where folks had the opportunity to air their grievances, be considered, be heard, and then come together understanding that we have to find what we have in common to actually get the ball down the field. getting the ball down the field in small plays is a lot better than just sitting there staring at it. Hail Marys very rarely work. And so I'm really happy to see things start to come together like that. And as has been already mentioned by my colleagues, we have had some bills that we've gotten through the House, gotten through the Senate, and actually became law on a bipartisan nature. I think Senator Sheehy had mentioned the Lake and Riley Act, and that came through bipartisan and became law. And I'm excited to see that, to see folks coming together, because I think it's really, really important. And even on the House side, I got sworn in on the 3rd of January, same day that we elected a Speaker of the House. And the previous Congress had a lot of consternation. It took a long time, was very disruptive for doing the work of the people and getting a Speaker elected. And folks got up and they said their parts, they aired their grievances, and then came together and actually got it done in a hurry so that we could get to work and doing what we were actually elected to do. So I think that's a good harbinger of how things should work. And I think that it's a healthy process. One of the things coming up right now, which I'm also excited about, and it's going to be a lot of work and it's going to be a lot of headbutting, but we just got a budget resolution passed. There was a lot of thought on how long that was going to take. And really, this is just the starting point on doing the real work. I mean, that resolution gives instructions to the committees that now need to do the hard work to put that budget together, which will then, end up in reconciliation as we try to get that through. And there's going to be some headbutting. There's going to be people that don't get what they want. There's going to be people that have to, settle things so we can get that done. But that's part of the process. And I'm excited about doing that. I'm excited about the work. But it's not lost on me, how difficult that work is going to be and how important it is to get that through. And I am excited about that. And I want to end on this section just talking about how important that is to understand that we are here to do the work of the people that voted us, that elected us to be here, the people that we represent, and we need to, start getting things done. For me, I have sponsored one bipartisan bill with one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, Representative Bynum. And this is basically about capital formation for small business in rural areas, which I think is incredibly important to Montana. We've got so much opportunity in Montana. We've got so much intelligence. We've got people coming out of our Montana universities that have ideas and starting businesses and figuring out how we can put them together with, there's money in Montana. How you put the ideas together with the money so we can actually start building Montana businesses. And I think that's incredibly important. And not just that. And one of the committees that I got in Congress, I'm really excited about. I'm on the Financial Services Committee. I worked really hard to be on that committee. It lined up with what I did as a state auditor and with my background. But there's just so much that is so meaningful to everything that we do. So on financial services, I'm on the capital markets subcommittee. And so that's all of that, dealing with raising money, starting businesses, capital formation, stuff that I did as the securities commissioner. I'm on the digital assets committee. And that, whether you like it or not, we're going to be talking about that for the foreseeable future. What we're going to do with distributed ledgers, with blockchain, with cryptocurrencies, with artificial intelligence. And, that, is going to be something that's very exciting and very scary at the same time, how we deal with that. And, my plans on that committee, which I think is likely going to take up most of my time, is to make sure that the United States of America continues to be the hotbed for innovation. We need to lead innovation. And that's not just on the regulatory side, because we need to make sure, because our enemies are trying to beat us. They're going to try to leave us in the dust, especially on artificial intelligence. And we can't be left in the dust. We have to be leading there. And so how do we open this up to allow fast innovation and still have reasonable sideboards so that we don't have a meltdown like we did with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried? What are the reasonable sideboards to protect Americans while really allowing that innovation? And then the next part of that is, how do we power it? The power requirements for this brave new world are going to be incredible. How do we not just generate power, but how do we transmit it? And I had an interesting conversation recently with Eric Schmidt, who was the former CEO of Google. He was talking about artificial intelligence, and he started his talk saying we need to burn coal, we need to burn oil, we need to burn gas, we need to put out, solar panels, we need to do hydro, we need to do nuclear, we need to do everything because we're not going to be able to power this. And so that's part of the equation, and the transmission is the other part. So that's really, really important stuff that we do to make sure that we are competitive and that we're not left in the dust by, adversaries. So incredibly important. So the other committees that I'm on I'm on housing and insurance, which kind of makes sense being the insurance commissioner, and a lot of big issues with what's going on in California. One of my first bills that I brought, insurance, for those who don't know, is regulated at the state level. So McCarran-Ferguson clearly puts the states in charge of regulating insurance. And we have a federal insurance office that was created under Dodd-Frank. And so the obvious question begs itself, why do you have a federal insurance office when the states are in charge of regulating insurance? So my first bill was to eliminate the federal insurance office, shrinking government, making sure we don't just have a blank check from the Treasury for an agency that really doesn't have a place in our system of government. So a little bit about the work that we've been doing, and my colleagues have already talked about this. We passed the Lake and Riley Act. We've passed a bill to protect women's and girls' sports. We passed a Preventing Violence Against Women Act. We have a bill for unleashing American energy on, allowing fracking. We have a bill out there that we passed on classifying fentanyl and its analogs as Schedule I controlled substances, the Halt Fentanyl Act. Fix our forests, which is incredibly important to a lot of our state, making sure that we're dealing with our forests. This was Bruce Westerman brought this to help with wildfires and forest management. I think that was incredibly important. The Born Alive bill, basically, it seems common sense to me, but making sure if a child is born in a botched abortion, that they're going to get medical care that would be normal for a child, and I think that is just I think that's just humane. So I mentioned some of the bills that I introduced, the Eliminate FIO Act. Also, here's another one that's important to Montana, the Montana economy, definitely to my district, is the Crow Revenue Act. And what this is going to do, it's going to allow us to continue mining coal at Signal Peak, where there's federal prohibitions, which is not just for my district, not just for the state of Montana, not just for those hundreds of jobs at the Signal Peak mine, but also for unleashing American energy. We need to make sure that we are not just energy independent, but that we're energy dominant, and that's in every flavor of energy. Another one that I'm going to be co-sponsoring with Commander Zinke, with Congressman Zinke, is the Fort Belknap Water Act, which also has money in there for dealing with the Milk River watershed, which is incredibly important to our irrigators on the High Line. That deferred maintenance has been a huge problem for that whole part of the state. We need to make sure that there's some consistency and some ability for our farmers to do what they do and produce food. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll say, I've co-sponsored 39 bills so far. We've been busy, and we're just getting started. And there have been a lot of First Amendment bills. I've been passed a couple of bills to help with our farmers and ranchers, securing our southern border, supporting Montana businesses and promoting financial inclusion, addressing Montana-specific issues. I already mentioned the Water Security Act, but also delisting the grizzly bear, and I've also co-sponsoring a bill on delisting the wolf. The ESA, the Endangered Species Act, needs to be updated. And as many of you know, I'm a veteran. I served in the Air Force, the Air National Guard. Veterans issues are very important to me. And I have also supported the Americans Act and will continue to do everything I can to support our veterans. I had somebody the other day point out to me, said, well, you were in the Air Force. That's almost like the military. But no, I will always be there for our veterans. I mean, they've signed at the dotted line, stood up to protect this great nation, and they deserve our support. You know, one of the things, and I talked about this a lot on my campaign, and it's something that I work on very, very hard. And I know that Senator Sheehy had mentioned this as well, but when you say that food security is national security, I mean, that goes back to the beginning of humanity. You know, if you want to take a country down, you make it so it can't feed itself. And I think that our farmers and ranchers are struggling and they need our support. You know, not just, you know, I talked about irrigation, but, you know, another part is in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, you know, that estate taxes. I actually testified in front of the Ways and Means Committee about how important that is to our business owners, to our ranchers, our farmers, because if you're forced to sell part of the farm, part of the ranch to pay your taxes, the likelihood of that staying in production agriculture is slim. It's at risk. And as we start to see our production agricultural land dwindle away, our ability not to just feed ourselves, feed the world, you know, goes away. And that's something that really scares me in trying to find ways that we can continue to support our farmers and ranchers. And you will see me as a champion of those issues that we need to keep, you know, growing food to feed not just America, but the world here in the United States of America. So I'm going to end this here shortly, just talking about, you know, a couple of more of my priorities here. You know, combating drug trafficking is a huge issue. A lot of you are from communities, because they're all over the state, where law enforcement is dealing with drug-related crime. We're starting to see, you know, cartels. We're starting to see MS-13 gangs. We're starting to see, you know, a lot of issues with drugs, and a lot of that's related to porous borders. And so not just our southern border or northern border, we need to make sure that we're watching and making sure that we don't have bad actors in here that are taking advantage of Montanans and causing our law enforcement to run themselves ragged. So another part, combating inflation, you know, fiscal policy. That's one of the hardest parts. And we're going to be faced with that here in the near future of dealing with our budget reconciliation, getting appropriations bills through, figuring out how we fund the government without, you know, causing it to go bankrupt. And so that's going to be a lot of, you know, tightening of the belts, a lot of hard work. Nobody's going to get everything that they want, but we need to fight this back, because the direction that we've been going in this country is not sustainable. And one of the things that I'm really concerned about is, you talk about the American dream, you know, and it's so hard. It's harder now than it was when I was growing up, and it's going to be harder again tomorrow if we don't deal with this, and possibly, you know, impossible the day after. And I worry how inflationary pressures have made it impossible for even a normal family starting out, you know, to buy their first house. And I don't mean in the near future, I mean ever. And so how do we start really fighting back to make sure that that American dream, where somebody that grows up with nothing other than the opportunities of being American, still has the opportunity to be successful? And that's something that I'm going to be fighting for. The other part, you know, is, as I mentioned briefly, is we need to renew the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the 2017 tax cuts, because if we allow that to expire, which is expiring this year, it'll be the biggest middle-class tax increase we've ever seen in the history of this country. We need to make sure we renew that. Another very important part is rebuilding our military. You know, you hear the term peace through strength all the time, but, you know, there's some truth to that. Because I want to make sure that we continue to build and maintain the absolute strongest fighting force on this planet, not because we ever want to go to war, but we want others to be afraid to go to war with us. Yeah, we talked about energy dominance. Not just America, Montana needs to be energy dominant. I mean, we are the treasure state. Let's make sure that we're continuing to access and develop, you know, our natural resources, and make sure that Montana is energy dominant. Another part kind of along that is critical minerals. And so I have a bill now that is a little two-pronged here to limit the export of critical minerals from Russia. So first of all, it's a way of cutting them, you know, their ability to wage war and raise money. And the other thing that it does is it keeps them from dumping platinum, palladium into the market, which suppresses the commodity prices and causes what we saw in the Sibanye-Stillwater mine with all those layoffs. Now, I want to end on this one last thing. Obviously, we talked about a lot of policy, what's going on in D.C., what kind of my vision is, and my real desire to make sure I'm amplifying what you want to do. But the other part of it is, in my office, I want to make sure that we are setting a new bar in constituent services. So if you have a problem where we can help, veterans issues, Social Security issues, passport issues, whatever it is, I want you to lean on our office because I want to make sure we are the most responsive office in the country in making sure that we're answering your questions and dealing with those. And that's where I really see my success, not just in the policy side, but make sure that everybody that I represent in the state of Montana knows that they can reach out to my office, and if we can't solve the problem, we'll find somebody who can, and that's my goal in this office. So on that, I just want to once again thank you all for doing what you do. I mean, I know this is hard. It's hard work, but it's worth it. This state is worth it. This country is worth it. The people that we represent is worth it. And I really appreciate the hard work and the sacrifices that you and your families do to do this. So, thank you for doing that, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Representative Downing. Sergeant of Arms, will you please escort a representative from the chamber? Sergeant of Arms Murfitt will please admit Chief Justice Swanson into the House chamber and accompany him to the rostrum. Members, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you and the people of Montana, Chief Justice Cory Swanson.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Montana Legislature, members of the Supreme Court, and guests. Thank you for inviting me to address a joint session of the Montana House and Senate to inform you of the state of the Montana judiciary. We live in truly interesting times, as witnessed by the fact that I'm standing here before you, still expecting to wake up and realize we've been subjected to an elaborate prank. But through God's grace and direction and the will of the people, I stand before you, intent on giving you every bit of diligence, integrity, and wisdom in my being. When I awoke on November 6th to the news that I had won the election, I was reminded of the words of Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr. on Utah Beach when he realized his division had been dropped 2 kilometers away from his objective. He told the Navy to keep sending in the troops, quote, "We'll start the war from here," end quote. And what war am I engaged in? It's actually the same war you're engaged in, and we're on the same side. It's the enduring struggle for good governance, which is one of the scarcest resources in human history. The people consented to delegate a portion of their self-governing powers to you and me so we could act on their behalf. This deal gave us the duty to serve them, not the power to rule over them. The same leaders who fought for our right to live in such a government designed the system to protect the rights of the citizens. These rights were created and granted by our Creator, not doled out by a government regulator. The genius of our republic prevents the entirety of governmental power from being concentrated in the hands of a single individual or a single branch of government. One of the pictures hanging in my Chief Justice chambers is a pictograph that shows the French army's disastrous attack into Russia and eventual retreat in 1812. I look at it every day as a reminder of the consequences of placing an entire nation's power into the hands of a single mad genius. America does not want a Napoleon or a cheap imitation of him in any branch of government at any level. And that's where the judiciary and the legislature come in. Our two branches of government have historically been the bulwark against tyranny. You have been the branch closest to the people. You expressed their will through laws, spending, and taxation. And the judiciary has been the check on executive and legislative power to prevent the popular will from destroying individual rights. Not only do we interpret the laws and the Constitution, but we create a forum where citizens can dispute against their government as equals in the courtroom. Think about that. Any two parties are equals in the courtroom, whether they are the least powerful citizen or the most powerful leader. That is at least partially the meaning of the words equal justice under law, which is carved across the front of the United States Supreme Court. The genius of our system is that it creates conflict to check the power of ambitious people. The drawback of our system is that it creates conflict to check the power of ambitious people. I mean, how am I supposed to get anything done when I have to come ask you people for money? I had to kind of pause and let that joke sink in. But before we get to the big elephant and donkey in the room, I invite you to agree with me on a few important measures in the interest of good government. The first and most important thing to emphasize is that the vast majority of the judiciary's work has nothing to do with intergovernmental power struggles. Well over 99% of cases are just ordinary people trying to make it through their lives and hoping that the local court can quickly resolve their problems. They're our customers and your constituents. My team and I presented the judicial branch to the Joint Subcommittee last week for budget. Most of our requests are simply carrying forward our duties under the current law. But I also asked for the addition of 3 district court judges in Yellowstone County. If you've been paying attention the past few years, you know that Montana is growing and crime in Billings is reaching new levels. The rising caseload problem in Yellowstone County is not exaggerated. In calendar year 2024, 29% of all statewide criminal cases were filed in Yellowstone County, and 26% of all child neglect cases were filed there. That means just 15% of the statewide judges handle well over a quarter of the most time-intensive cases. We are working on measures in that judicial district to help them cross-level their caseloads and resolve them more efficiently. But the bottom line is we also need more judges. So as you weigh new policy proposals such as specialty courts, please continue to support these additional district court judges in Billings so we can uphold our responsibility to the largest city in our state. The second observation I want to make is that we can find ways to work cooperatively together without compromising our mutual commitments to the Constitution. To do so, we need to break down walls of misunderstanding and mistrust between us. Charlie Russell told a story about a young girl who once asked her mother if cowboys were born with horns, and her mother answered, "No, dear, cowboys are partly human." Well, some folks wonder if judges were born with black robes on, and I'm here to tell you, judges are partly human. I'd urge you to get to know them, and they will probably surprise you with their humanity and common sense. So I want to briefly highlight 4 ways in which I believe these partly human judges can work together with you. The first is confirming judges. The next time you see me in a committee hearing, I'll probably be supporting the Senate's confirmation of 4 judges to the bench this session. Governor Gianforte recently appointed Scott Herring to a vacant district court judgeship in the 7th Judicial District, that's in eastern Montana. And he will soon appoint a district judge to fill the vacancy in the 20th Judicial District in western Montana. I will enthusiastically support both of these appointments. We also have 2 water court judgeships that require confirmation. Stephen Brown has been appointed chief water judge to fill the vacancy created by Judge Russ McElyer's retirement. And I had the pleasure to appoint Bina Peters to the position of Associate Water Judge to fill Judge Brown's vacancy. I strongly support both Judge Brown and Judge Peters and request your speedy confirmation. The second issue is mental health needs. As I have visited with district court judges across the state, I have asked them for recommendations on how to address the functionality problems within the judicial branch. The #1 response across the state has been a request to speed up the mental health evaluations and treatment for people in criminal cases. There have been many publicized and extensive discussions about the needs at the Montana State Hospital. I'm not going to reiterate those here, but there is a subset of that problem that directly affects many criminal cases across the state. When a criminal defendant is possibly mentally unfit, he or she cannot proceed to trial without a court-ordered mental evaluation and treatment to make them fit. That often requires treatment at the Forensic Mental Health Facility at Galen. Then some criminal defendants are adjudicated what's called guilty but mentally ill, and they generally go to the Galen facility for evaluation before they start their sentence at the Montana State Hospital. For years, the demand for these services has outpaced the resources committed to the Galen facility. When a defendant is charged with a serious crime and is referred to Galen and there's no room, then the district judges all over the state are confronted with the difficult question of keeping a mentally ill criminal defendant in jail or releasing them into the community and potentially harming themselves or others. Some of these wait times are very long, and I'm really concerned because they're going to place judges in the position of having to potentially dismiss serious criminal cases for lack of action. This solution lies entirely in your hands. I know you have smart and dedicated people who are working on this problem with the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm just taking this opportunity to reinforce from the bench that the problem is real, it is statewide, and it's not going away. Now, we need to talk about the X-Files. Montana has a surprisingly diverse array of legislative records kept in multiple locations, depending on the type of record and the year that it was generated. 4 different entities have partial archives, but no single entity contains all the archives in a preserved and easily accessible format. These 4 entities are the Montana Historical Society, the State Library, the Legislative Services Division, and the State Law Library. They're under different branches or boards, and there doesn't seem to be any unifying effort for these organizations to compile and preserve these comprehensive historical records. There is one subset of these records that is in danger of being permanently lost if we don't act soon to preserve them. These are the recordings of legislative committee hearings from the years 1997 through the 2003 legislative session. These records are currently housed in the Montana Historical Society. They have been difficult and at times impossible to access during the years of the Historical Society renovation. Some of these records are only stored on a single cassette tape, which time and storage conditions may work to completely erase before they are preserved. This inability to access these meeting minutes and my imagination that they're stored in a warehouse with the Lost Ark of the Covenant has led me to call these missing records the X-Files. So I'm asking that the legislature take the lead through an interim study or a commission to bring stakeholders from all 4 of these entities together, and let's catalog the entire array of legislative archives, preserve the records, and to make them accessible to the public. I'm volunteering the services of the state law librarian, Franklin Runge, to participate in such an effort. He will bring substantial expertise and enthusiasm to this project. My 4th effort, if I don't destroy my light here, over the next 2 years is I'm going to conduct a thorough top-to-bottom review of the judicial branch. Our branch is a small portion of the overall state budget, but we still owe the people our diligence to ensure we're spending every dollar wisely. That means we need to ensure we're meeting today's needs, not yesterday. And I will review every program and every person in the branch. If we can save money or innovate to better meet Montana's needs, we will do so. That includes my commitment to you that we will be as open as possible. Judges cannot speak about cases they're working on out of fairness to the parties. But we can and should speak about how our courts function, how we spend the people's money, and how we fulfill their trust. So to the extent we can open up the doors and windows and brush out the cobwebs, we will. And then in 2 years, I'll present a budget and a judicial branch policy that will be the result of renewed scrutiny and innovation, relying on the collective wisdom of the smartest people I can consult. So as I prepare to depart, I want to leave you with one word that summarizes my long-term goals and vision for the judiciary. And that word is capacity. You were expecting something more inspiring, but bear with me. Leaders have a fundamental duty to develop greater capacity in their people. Capacity is a realistic vision of what a person can accomplish in the future. It requires the recognition of existing latent capability and the faith to develop it. That includes coaching individuals to increase their individual capacity and leading groups to multiply their capacity through teamwork. So what does this have to do with judges? Improving the judiciary's proficiency means encouraging excellent lawyers with high capacity and a vision of public service to become judges. Just as the legislature rises and falls by the quality of the people in your seats, so the judiciary rises and falls by the quality of the people on the bench. But most good judges and good lawyers do not get excited about being hauled into a legislative committee and grilled about politics and not the law. We want juicy cases all about life, death, love, hate, greed, and generosity. Pretty much my wife's podcast playlist. I'm looking for her in the gallery. I think she's here somewhere. But we don't look forward to cases about power struggles between the legislature and the courts. That means encouraging really good lawyers and judges to adopt or continue in this profession gets significantly harder when they hear about bills that many in my profession would call judicial harassment. And how does that affect you? Well, it may feel good to pass laws that make it harder for me to do my job, but ultimately it will harm you because it will be counterproductive to the proper functioning of our government. So it's time to talk about the elephant and the donkey in the room, but I believe I've used up my time, so I'm going to be on my way. Okay, so we've experienced a higher than normal level of tension among our three branches. Speaking candidly, I believe the conflicts in 2021 and 2023 caught leaders in all three branches of government by surprise. America and Montana have experienced a changed political dynamic, which was expressed in legislation that some people called overdue, other people called it overreach. People then fought over this legislation in the courtroom because that's what Americans like to do. And many people didn't like the outcomes. So what do we do about the present and what do we do about the future? I would personally like to break this cycle and get back to writing more opinions about the rule against perpetuities. I don't even know what it is, but I'm looking forward to writing it someday. So on many occasions, I speak for the court, but in writing judicial opinions, I'm only one voice out of 7, so the comments I make now are my own. We are in the midst of a robust public debate on the Supreme Court. Some say the court has repeatedly overridden legislative policy-making authority and skewed its own canons of interpretation to reach predetermined case outcomes. Does that resonate with anybody? Others say the legislature has passed blatantly unconstitutional laws and then blame the court for striking them down. It's like picking a jury. Group participation is really what my goal is here today. So what's my personal response? I'm not going to deliver it in this forum. You will need to read the full case opinions and dissents in the coming months and years to see how the court navigates these difficult issues. But these pitched battles have led some to say the nonpartisan nature of the judiciary is a facade, and we should openly declare political affiliations of candidates and Supreme Court justices. I understand from many of your comments in the governor's speech, this is one of the main things you want to accomplish. I have personally stated and been asked this question 100 times in the last year The judiciary should remain nonpartisan, despite the almost irresistible pull of partisan spending and messaging in these highly contested campaigns. That is not based on a constitutional opinion. I have not researched the issue. I'm not offering a constitutional opinion. It's based on my personal commitment to the people of Montana, to each of you, to decide every case based on the facts and the law of that case, not based on the party or the affiliation of the litigants. And if at least 3 of my colleagues have the same commitment to process, it won't matter whether we are Democrats or Republicans. So I urge you to focus the rest of your judiciary-related legislation on making the institution better. The legislature has broad policy-making authority, including over many parts of the judiciary. We welcome legislation that addresses and resolves policy problems in our midst. But I urge you to reject legislation that will undermine the effective functioning of the judiciary, not because judges don't like it, but because it will ultimately harm Montana citizens. Now, as it happens, you're considering a number of bills currently that well-respected attorneys are telling you violate the constitutional separation of powers. I urge you to listen to those arguments because they're probably the same arguments that you will hear if those issues are litigated in my courtroom. Again, there's no point in creating unnecessary and quite predictable conflicts between our branches. So if you support my vision to increase the capacity and proficiency of the judiciary, and if you've trusted my judgment up to this point, I ask that you consider these remarks each time you vote on a judicial bill. We have inherently structurally designed conflict within our republic, and we don't need to needlessly invite more. So in conclusion, I thank you for your gracious invitation to share my thoughts on the state of the judiciary. Now it's time for me to get back to doing my job. I leave you here with the assurance that I will not try to do your job. I sincerely offer my gratitude, respect, and friendship as you fulfill your duty to pass the budget and set policy for the coming biennium. Now, to modify that famous phrase from General Roosevelt, let's end the war from here.
Thank you, Chief Justice Swanson. The Sergeant of Arms, please escort the Chief Justice from the chamber. Sergeant of Arms Murfitt will please admit Chairman Grayhawk Sr. into the House chamber and accompany him to the rostrum. Members, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you and the people of Montana, Chairman Justin Grayhawk Sr. of the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes.
Dakepi. Daya ya hipi, nako daya unhipi. Chante washte na pe chiu zapi. Ona gichu pina hiha awayang wicha amakia pedo. Ona waxtincha wakpa Dakota Nakota oyate emataha. Hello, my relatives. I greet each and every one of you with a good heart. I carry two names in my traditional life. The first name is Shoots for Him, I received when I was a young boy. My second name is Owl Looks After Him Man, and I received that here within the last few years. Thank you, Senator Sheehy, Congressman Zinke, Congressman Downey, Chief Justice Swanson, Senate President Reiger, Speaker Lehr, and Majority Leader McGilvery, Governor Gianforte, Lieutenant Governor Juris, tribal leaders, distinguished guests, elders, youth, my wife Orlando, my children, and legislator. Thank you all who have gathered to listen to the State of the Tribal Nations address. Thank you, Representative Tuss, for your words of prayer. And please let me take time to introduce the tribal leaders that join me today. Blackfoot Tribal Chairman Rodney Jarvis, Councilmember Carol Langford of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes, President Gene Small, Northern Cheyenne Tribe, also Chairman Gerald Gray of the Little Shaw Tribe of Chippewa. Thank you, tribal leaders, for the honor. Thank you, tribal leaders, for the honor to represent you today. Honorable Governor Gianforte and Lieutenant Governor Juris, we appreciate your outreach to Indian country. We appreciate seeing some of our Indian people, such as Misty Cool as one of your cabinet members, and Donnie Wetzel as part of your Montana Department of Transportation staff. You demonstrate your commitment to the Indian people when you have met with us, negotiated agreements, made staff available, and even provided congressional testimony to support tribal and state efforts. We look forward to working through the challenges and the opportunities facing our nations these next 4 years. Distinguished members of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and in particular, our American Indian legislators, our senators, Senator Susan Weber, Senator Shane Morjo, Senator Jacinda Morjo, and my Senator Jonathan Windyboy. Our representatives, Representative Shelley Fayant, Representative Tyson Running Wolf, Representative Sidney Fitzpatrick, Representative Mike Fox, Representative Donovan Hawk, Representative Jade Sutkis, Representative Thetis Crow, and my representative, the Fort Peck Tribal member, Frank Smith. Montana has the largest Indian caucus in the United States. The Montana voters truly showed its value that we need a state legislature that includes Indian representation and Indian voices. American Indian Caucus, we look to you for leadership as this legislative session continues. On behalf of the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes of the Fort Peck Reservation and the tribal nations across the state of Montana, I am honored to present the State of the Tribal Nations Address, and I am proud to report our Indian nations are strong, healthy, and resilient. Legislature, we are your constituents and appreciate your support in many of Indian country's efforts. For example, the Assiniboine and Gros tribes of Fort Belknap received Montana's unified support for its pending Fort Belknap water settlement, in which Lieutenant Governor Juris gave Montana's supporting testimony to Congress. The Fort Peck tribes are proud to report through meaningful tribal consultation with the State Transportation Department, the roundabouts and artwork in the heart of Poplar, Montana, proudly reflect our culture of our community. The Little Shaw Tribe of Chippewa is gaining state support for its Cascade County economic ventures. And the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribes in the state of Montana entered into an innovative marijuana tax sharing agreement. Those are only a few examples. There are many, many more examples of how our tribal nations and the state work together. Montana Legislature, Indian country is watching you. Our nations come to testify for or against your bills. Many of these bills can impact treaty obligations, and some clearly violate treaty promises. We appreciate seeing your bills to support law enforcement funding in Congress, MMIP, MICWA, Native American Day as a state holiday, government-to-government consultation, and especially expanded Medicaid, which has been the lifeline to Indian country and all of Montanans. We need to acknowledge the Charles M. Russell painting that dominates this chamber behind me. It fits somewhere between the Indian in a cupboard and the elephant in the room, because it always serves as a historic reminder of our relationships between the tribes and to those who came out west. At that time in the world, people were moving out west to fulfill their dreams of finding natural resources and an economy that the gold rush had to offer. Some moved to this area due to the flight from religious persecution from their own homelands. And others, such as Lewis and Clark and Sakakawea, were simply exploring the West. Many of our tribal nations have been in this territory since time immemorial. Montana is home to the 7 of the largest Indian reservations in the United States. It includes 12 federally recognized tribes and over 78,000 American Indian residents. I come from the Great Sioux and Assiniboine nations of the Fort Peck Reservation. It's over 2 million acres and serves over 11,000 tribal members. The Fort Peck Reservation was established in 1888 by an act of Congress. In 1889, a year later, Montana was the 41st state to be admitted to the Union. The relationship between our tribal nations and other governments is unique in many ways. The United States Supreme Court has described it as a government-to-government relationship and describes our tribes as domestic dependent nations. The Supreme Court recognizes us as having a political status rather than a racial status. We all have much to learn from each other. The Montana Constitution requires all Montana public schools to teach students, Indian and non-Indian, about the American Indians. This constitutional mandate began in 1972, when voices from across the state traveled to Helena to testify at the Montana Constitutional Convention about the need to improve public school education for and about Indians in Montana. Article 10, Section 1, Educational Goals and Duties of the Montana Constitution states, the state recognizes the distinct and unique cultural heritage of the American Indians and is committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural integrity. This legislature will continue to decide legislation to make good on this constitutional promise to deliver Indian education to all. The state is working through a class action lawsuit that our tribe started to uphold the state constitution with Indian education. This legislature has the power to fix and honor the values that the Montana Constitution holds today. To listen and learn from each other is just as important today as it was in 1972. Today, we continue to partnership. It is a partnership that must be based on mutual respect and understanding. For example, we are not okay with staff walking out during our testimony from legislative committee hearings. We know that as citizens of Montana, we all must listen and consider the input if we are all to move forward. It is not like the battles of centuries ago when we used guns and horses, but one where we used diplomacy and statesmanship to come together for the benefit of all. Our fights today are for the very survival of our tribal nations. Like any fight, we must pick our battles carefully. There should be no bills coming from the heart of Indian country that infringes on fundamental treaty rights such as hunting and fishing. And all of our tribes work together for the common good of all. For many years, the tribes of Montana have been national leaders in bringing buffalo back and reestablishing the spiritual, cultural, and material bonds that have linked our tribes to bison for thousands of years. Every reservation now has a buffalo herd, and Montanans and Americans across the country have applauded our work. Every year, thousands of people come to see our buffalo, and several tribes have given non-tribal hunters the opportunity to harvest bison on reservation lands. Unfortunately, our efforts have often been opposed by the state and other interests, along with the state's most recent treaty right challenge to hunt on unoccupied federal lands. Tribal nations are unified in defending our treaty rights. As we look ahead, I am hopeful that we can build a better cooperation with the state of Montana and work together to restore buffalo to their native grasslands on behalf of both our tribal and non-tribal people's interest. And we cannot allow racist bills that cause racist division in our communities. We appreciate the bills that support our native languages, and we cannot support bills that support only one religion to hang on the walls in our schools. Many foreigners fled to America over religious persecution from their own countries. We cannot now tell our children that there is only one way to speak or one religion. It is important to acknowledge and work to overcome the racism that exists in our state. Our elders teach us that we combat racism through common appreciation, understanding, and knowing who we come from, so we can share us with others. And as we visit through the Montana constitutional values and Montana values, I believe we will find that we have more in common than not. Like many in this room, I too am a devoted husband and a parent. I too care about the health of our people and the goodness of our communities and the sustainability of our economies. All of our tribal, state, and federal governments focus on improving good health, economic development, and the challenges of unemployment and being rural. For too long, rural Montana struggles in economic development. Our reservation suffers with an unemployment rate as high as 70%. Even with these high rates of unemployment and economic development challenges, the 7 Indian reservations of Montana and the Little Shell Tribe of Chippewa, according to studies, contribute $1 billion toward the Montana economy. This is an important time to come together. It is important to remind ourselves and our surrounding communities that together we are greater than the sum of our parts. Despite the national news and the economies in Indian country remain strong, viable, and ready to contribute. So continue to keep us in mind as you plan for Montana rural community needs. It is time to look hard at the infrastructure and development and energy development throughout Indian country. It is time to come together as one people with a single vision in developing how we can all benefit from improved energy. We have shovel-ready projects waiting for the winter to run its course. We have people who want to go back to work. Our nations are hungry for improvement. Legislators, as you deliberate to make laws that govern our state, let Charlie Russell's painting behind me remind you of your responsibility to include and represent American Indians. As you deliberate these ideas, please consider the impact you will have on our Indian nations. I agree with United States Supreme Court Chief Justice Hugo Black when he deliberated about our treaties that the United States made with our tribes. He stated, "Great nations, like great men, should keep their word." Aho. Piramia, Wopiratanka, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Grayhawk Sr. Will the Sergeant of Arms please escort Chairman Grayhawk Sr. from the chamber? Members, please be seated. Majority Leader McGilvray.
Mr. President, I move that the joint session be adjourned.
You've heard the motion of Majority Leader McGilvray. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it, and we are adjourned. What the heck?